Brought to you by Telehelping, a virtual assistant staffing company for professionals.
Hello everyone, my name is Cody, the host of The Faces, Entrepreneurs Are People Too, and the founding CEO of Telehelping, a virtual staffing organization, and the herein sponsor of my podcast. So thank you so much for Telehelping for allowing me the opportunity to talk to great folks like Ari. Ari, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Cody. How are you doing?
Hey, you know what? Making it through. It's hit or miss depending on the moment of the day, but I'm surviving.
That's all we can ask for sometimes.
It truly is. And I'm sure we'll get to moments like that in our conversation. But first, tell the listeners in here today, who's Ari? Who are we chatting with here today?
Well, I'm a lawyer turned mediator and arbitrator. I opened my own practice called AJS Resolution here in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in October. I was doing mediations and arbitrations a little bit before that with my old law firm, but decided to make the jump into entrepreneurship, and just because it's truly something I love to do and wanted to give it my 100% focus. I think a lot of it came from, I have a 3-year-old son. I have one on the way as well. And so I think it came from wanting to spend more time with him and create my own schedule. Also realizing that, life is short, should be doing what I love and what I'm good at, and mediation and arbitration, really mediation is what I love to do. So before that, I've been working as a lawyer for, since I graduated Marquette University Law School in 2012, and been working in a variety of areas of the law, both on the plaintiff side and the defense side, mostly in injury actions, but then also some corporate litigation and employment law cases as well.
Nice. All right. That's incredible. And it's hilarious that you have a 3-year-old. I have a 2.5-year-old. I'm having a baby here shortly. You're having a baby shortly afterwards. So we may be intertwined closely in the fabric of the universe. So I'm going to cautious listeners here that there may be some, touching a correlation of timelines here that we're not quite familiar with yet. So let's see how that goes. And it's hilarious that I'm talking to you as right before here, I served a formal notice of material breach of a contract and requested arbitration. And so, hilarious. Not something you really don't ever want to do that. And so, how do you find yourself as being the person who wants to be in the middle of that, literally quite in the middle of it?
Well, it started in law school. I was a research assistant for the director of the dispute resolution program at Marquette, Andrea Schneider, who she's now at in New York, and running the same program there. And so something with her kind of clicked. I love doing the mediation competitions. I love doing client services type stuff. And then after I graduated, and moved to Philly. I passed the bar and became a law clerk to a judge here in Philly. And okay. I was her law clerk for 2 years, was at Sheridan Harris, wonderful woman. She was always involving me in trying to get cases settled. And I loved being in the middle of it then. And I didn't really ever want to be a judge. I don't know if I have the tenacity for it, but and maybe the slight ego for it.
Yeah.
But I loved being in the middle. I loved analyzing the issues that face these parties and seeing things from both sides. So that's kind of how I started it. And then a few years ago, I think, all right, is this something I really want to do? And Philadelphia court system has a great program where they require all civil cases to be to go through a settlement conference program, meaning mini mediation. 1 hour. I get the memos, the day before. I review them. I have my hour session, try to get things settled. I tried that out, and I still do it today because, frankly, it's the best way for me to get business. It's free advertising, and I loved what I did there, and that proved to me that this is the direction I wanted to.
That's great. And it takes kind of finessing your way through life to determine, what you're made for, and I consult every now and then, oftentimes with telehelping clients. We get a variety of legal, finance, and accounting folks who come to us. And sometimes those folks, though they run their own business, don't know exactly what they're trying to do. They may know what they do, lawyer, accounting, finance, but they don't know what they're trying to do operationally, sales, and marketing wise. And I, being that we work with them, I have an intimate understanding of those things professionally, and I'm able to mash them together. But the funny part about it is when I do consult with these folks on a very limited basis, when I work with the occasional person that's a little bit more overbearing, I remind myself quite immediately why I don't work with people. I'm not an employee. I can't do it. And so it's also why I do my contracts on a 30-day basis. And so, I have 30 day by 30 day, and generally I don't exceed 90 days, but you never know what someone's going to work with. Sometimes folks will bring me on and say, Cody, tell me what to do. Let's, direct the virtual assistants in the way that you think is going to be best. And sometimes, they're the moisture on the back of my neck. And I'll remind them hey, listen, you brought me on to do something. Let me do it. But it's great that you've been able to find your way now into the entrepreneur space, knowing that you don't have the ego for a judge and that you kind of like being in the mix of things, being able to see both sides of a situation. You having that visibility, that throughput on site is very important for what you do. It's good that you were able to identify that.
Yeah, it's funny now that I am on the more neutral end of things. I'm able to take a step back than when I was practicing actively. I still have a few clients, who, for whatever reason, want to stick with me. Might have a trial coming up soon. We'll see. But for the most part, I can back up a little bit, which is nice, and see the big picture. Sometimes as a lawyer, you get so in the weeds, and I'm sure you have this too with certain parts of your business where you get so in the weeds that you don't look at the bit. You need to be reminded, look at the big picture. And now I can sit back and look at the big picture a lot more while also getting into the weeds that are necessary.
No, I agree. And, oftentimes I find that with, the contracting side, the consulting piece is, I can see and identify a lot more things that the person could be doing, but I have to remind myself of the scope of my relationship. And so I have to maintain a certain depth of involvement. And so I'm like, oh, they definitely should do this. However, you can lead a horse to water, right? And so, that's a constant reminder that I have to tell myself. I can't force direction on anybody. I can only advise. On the other side of that as well, you're able to do this while maintaining a family. You're growing, right? You've got number 2 on the way. Talk to us about that. Are you more plans for more kids? 2 is done.
2 and we're done. And I'll make sure of that. But we're very happy. We're very lucky. It has, been a lot of people have gone through, and you don't hear about it too much, but it's kind of important to bring up because people don't talk about it. Is you never know what's going on behind the door, right? With a lot of people that you work with. And unfortunately, in our circumstances, we went through numerous miscarriages. And after our first, our first with his name's Rami, was awesome. It's a great pregnancy, everything, great for me, right? I didn't have to carry the baby, but, everything went well. And then the difficulties happened when we started trying to have a second. But we're almost there. But to answer your question, that kind of played into this whole decision. There was so much out of my control. Even now, there's still so much out of my control that I felt like I was losing control of my own life, where I was kind of following other people's paths, staying at a law firm that I enjoyed, but did I love? Did I see myself there for long term? I don't know. Maybe that kind of, that law firm also in May of 2024 broke up. My last law firm that I worked for. So 4 out of the 6 partners left and went to create their own firm out in a town, Westchester, about an hour away from here. And I had no desire to be commuting an hour, even though I can work remotely. You still want to be I like going into the office and being with people. And so I stayed with the 2 partners here. And then, so that was that's when I first brought up the idea, hey, this is what I want to do. And they were all for it because they just lost a lot of business. So I started bringing in mediation into the law firm. And then, one thing after another, I just wanted to gain control. And I found myself just loving what I was doing. I just literally sat down. What can I do to gain control of my life? 1, be with my family, concentrate on my family, on the micro, unit. 2, be awesome and love what I do at work. What do I love at work? Well, I love this mediation. I love dispute resolution. I love being a neutral, and I'm pretty good at it. And 3, be better with my health. I had been, I'd always worked out, I always ran, but I never really concentrated on my health. And I've been about February, about a little over a year now, I've been supremely concentrating on my health, working out, diet, I like to eat, so it's fine. I've been drinking a little bit less, but those are 3 things that you can control, right? Yeah. You can kind of, especially now that, everything's going well with my wife with the pregnancy. And so I'm just, we're concentrating on what you can control really brought me to where I am now.
No, that's great. And, that's, again, touching on timelines, right? My wife and I had numerous miscarriages as well, leading up to the second child. The first one just seemed to happen without a hitch. Right. And then we had
more overlap here with our lives.
Right. It's crazy. And, it was funny. It's just like when we had the first miscarriage, it went from like, oh, we'll take another baby. Sure. To like, well, are we able to have another baby? Right. And then being able to, are you curious if you can have another baby? Really intensifies the wanting another baby. And then when you have another baby, you're excited, but then you have to ask yourself, did you really want another baby, or did you want to prove that you could have another baby? And so, I'm excited for our son to come along, but that's something I pose to my wife all the time. Like, we had numerous miscarriages, and the question was more so, could we? And that could we drove into can we? And can we now ask is, do we want? And so, well, ready or not, right, we're having. However, is this an interesting mentality how that does take place, because it's it's impactful for us, right? I'm sure it was not fun for you, but it's a horrible experience for your wife, and I think that was something to experience in life, because I didn't know what to tell her, how to reassure her, make her feel, I'm just trying to do what we're doing on a daily basis, trying not to skip a beat. And then also, by the way, she's having this internal battle, this challenge that she was taking place. So well, I'm happy for you that worked out for us, right? Go us.
Yeah, go us and go our wives.
Right. Yeah. And that's correct. And it's great that you were able to find the balance. And I think it's a journey that we oftentimes will continue to find ourselves in, because I myself, sitting here today, am like, okay, well, I know what I don't want to do and what I do want. However, I find myself oftentimes experiencing things that I don't want. And then I'm like, all right, well, how do I manage this? Right. I have one contract right now. It's like, wonderful client, right? Multiple virtual assistants with us. Enjoy the guy. However, a little overbearing, and that's okay. It's his company. I'm just additional clog in his wheel, trying to, help him with hyper growth. But I find myself sometimes, like, as I told my wife, like, I don't think I'm going to renew after this month, because, I want him to continue on his thing, but I don't do well with, being in situations where someone's so overbearing. And then I ask myself, I'm like, well, how did I get in this situation in the first place? Right. And then you go like, well, I won't do that again. And then you're doing that again. And so I know the exact one, but it's great that you were able to navigate that and then also add value to the firm.
Right. Right. And, so many things are out of our control in life. And if you can just start intentionally controlling what you can control, not everything is possible.
Correct.
And I come from, I was born and grew up in suburban DC, and so in Maryland. And I've been this is also kind of the path that led me to being a mediator. I feel like I've kind of been everywhere. I went to school in Massachusetts at UMass Amherst. I went to Chicago after I was in the sports field for a bit, and concentrated solely on sports and entertainment. I went to Marquette just for sports law. Well, not just for sports law, but to get a good degree. But also they have one of the top sports law programs, and I kind of found this love of dispute resolution, and because conflict is everywhere, and when I'm involved in the conflict, I'm not always so great at it. I've gotten a lot better, taken a lot of practice. It's just like being a lawyer. You're really good. You might be really good at handling other people's problems, but maybe not your own legal problems, right? And so, I still practice that. My son is the best person to negotiate with, because it's just always no, right? He always wants whatever, or he always wants to disagree. And so you have to think of creative solutions, right? It's
Correct.
great practice for mediation and negotiation. So.
Yeah. Oftentimes at telehelping, we have a mediation clause naturally, right? Because who wants to go straight to guns, right? I oftentimes approach legalities and relationships and some of the issues that come from those things, which oftentimes are meant for good. Everything starts off with good, right? No one gets married, signs a business deal with the idea that one day they're going to be fighting this person, but you should, right? And the idea of it is that every good business relationship is great, but for every good business relationship, there's bad ones out there that didn't go as planned. And and having someone who can sit down and take both sides is an important element. What do you find when dealing with folks in these particular circumstances? Their mentality is. Are they sitting there just wanting to strangle each other, or is there usually one aggressor and one person just confused how this even came about? Talk to us about some of your experiences in this space.
Sure. I'll start with one that, and obviously can't divulge too much, but
of course.
I'll start with one that unfortunately I did not help settle. As far as I know, the case is still going on, but it was two business owners who, one was a vendor for the plaintiff, and was doing essentially some SEO work. We'll just leave it at that, doing some SEO work. And then and it just went down. They despised each other. I had to really talk and empathize with each individual. I'm the plaintiff. I might have just empathized and said, hey, I understand you were wrong, right? But I can then go back to the vendor and say, hey, I understand that you feel like he overreacted when he did X, Y, Z, right? All this can be true even though it's opposite, right? Even though they're kind of conflicting ideas. I don't, depending on the case, in this one specifically, I did not have them be in the same room. They never spoke to each other. Even though at the end, one of them did want an apology as part of a negotiation, as part of a settlement, but we never got to the number, right? And so that was a tough one because everyone was so stuck in their position. But then you have one where, it was an employment discrimination case. This person, the plaintiff, just wanted to be heard, wanted to be understood, wanted to have her day in court. I treated that as her day in court. I let her tell me her story. And it didn't matter to me whether it was actually true or not. She clearly believed that what happened to her truly happened and affected her livelihood, affected her ability to work, and affected her at home. And I have to, in those cases, I have to empathize. It doesn't matter what the truth is. I'm here to help settle a case, help this woman, or help this plaintiff feel like they've been heard, not just by their attorney, but by the other side. But also explain to these people that what the pros and cons of their case is in a gentle manner, right? So for example, in the employment discrimination case, and this applies to a lot of them, one of your employees may feel that they were discriminated against, whether religiously, racially, breach of the ADA requirements. They may feel that they've been violated in some way. And these are identities that we hold really close. So these are emotionally charged. And so my job to, one, listen and empathize, but also then explain to them, the law doesn't always grant damages for that level of violation. Right. And so that's why sitting here at mediation, you might actually get more than you would at a trial, because it doesn't really matter right now what the law grants. It does in terms of the value of what we can settle it for, but the other side also doesn't want to go to trial. No employer wants to go to trial and be accused of discrimination. So it's my job to get the plaintiff in those specific instances to just understand kind of what the process is and listen to someone or hear from someone who isn't their attorney, who they've been with for a year and a half, probably tired of listening.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. And you're right. I definitely can see the value that some people may have at just going through the process, right? Almost similar to living the experience out so that you can stop, stressing over what the experience could have been or could be. I've found myself in many mediations. Being a mediator is such an interesting thing, because you weren't there when whatever happened took place, right? And, I remember a mediator once, I had recently came into a company and as an executive, and I was dealing with the mediation as the person who oversaw HR, right? And the lady's like, well, I don't understand why I'm talking to you. You weren't even at the company when it happened. And the mediator's like, well, I wasn't at the company either. So should I stop listening? Right? Think about it. And so it was the funniest thing I ever heard from a mediator. And it was a valid point, because, they're there to have everyone play out a different perspective and hear what's going on for the greater outcome. Ultimately mediation is a great tool, I believe, because court cases suck. going to court is never fun. And so people who think they want to go to court, no, you do not, right? I have an ongoing lawsuit, and we're 2 years into it, right? And the thing is we're going to win. Like, we are going to win, right? It's just it is going to happen. However, how long is it going to take to win, right? And the funny part is we've attempted to mediate multiple times, right? And the organization that we're going against they're dead set on their day in court, and I'm all for it. Like, okay. However, just so you're aware, it's just really clear cut. I always say that telehelping's back-to-back lawsuit champions, because, we have really great agreements, and everyone who's ever watched any of my podcasts, talking to any of the lawyers, you should know I live and breathe by documents. Right. And everything is documented. You want to be on my podcast? Got a document for that.
I was about to say, I read it and signed it.
So, but what's important is, and it's the same thing. Like, so one thing that we're offering, again, documents, we started clients, and I thought it would be a nice thing to do, right? Because we've amassed a nice group of subscribers on the channel, right? A couple thousand now, very interactive folks. And I thought, occasionally I get clients from this, and it wasn't the intention of the podcast, but it's nice, right? And I was like, you know what? It'd be really cool if I gave them something for it. Like, what if I started advertising for that client, for a week, right? And I'm giving, I'll give them a shout out for 30 seconds on all my podcasts for the week after they sign up, just to why not, right? Give them some exposure, just something cool, right? A free service, like just doing it for nice. There's a document for that now. And so this is just because, great, you XYZ Inc. wants to be my client. Great. Maybe they don't want me advertising on, maybe they say they do, and then they decide they don't. And we don't have it documented anywhere other than a conversation or an email. It's just nice to formalize it. Just have it there, right? Even the best intentions can get you in trouble.
That is true. A comment you made earlier about, contracts. It's tough. You go into business, especially when you go into business with someone you got to have that contract. And even not all mediation has to result from litigation, right? You could just need a mediator to help with drafting a contract, to get those terms in, because you're stuck in your position of what you believe this contract should say. Both of you want to have this relationship, but you got to do the business part, right? Or the legal part. You got to have this contract. The whole goal of contracts is to, frankly, put them in a cabinet and never see them again, right? Ideally. But I'm here when those go wrong, because also mediation is cheaper than going to court. A little bit of a sales pitch there, but it's true. I mean, and it's also it's pretty cathartic to have your story heard, whether you're on one side or the other. It doesn't matter. Having your story heard is extremely cathartic, and I love it. I love being able to empathize with these people. I love dealing with difficult clients. You mentioned that earlier, kind of hard-headed people. They're the most fun for me, because when you get them to understand what the end goal is, and then it clicks, there is very little more satisfying, especially when the attorney then says, I've been trying to do this for a year, and you just did it in an afternoon. Sometimes you have to step back.
Yeah, that's great. And, a curiosity, maybe I could, because I've seen it done, and I've done it before previously in contracts, reference a mediation company that we would use. Do you have those type of relationship with the company where, if telehelping wanted to have you as our official mediator in all lawsuits, right? I don't want more, but say we did have some in the future, right? Say you will, right? When your product is humans, right? And your clients are humans, you're going to have disagreements. Crazy. Or do you oftentimes have that type of relationship where, you're referenced directly in contract as the go-to mediator for situations, or is it something that someone just calls you up for?
Right now, someone just calls me up, but that is something that I am working on. There's a small business group in Philadelphia that I'm getting involved with, and that would be my first start, right? When they have conflict, because as I'm relatively new when it comes to this, I'm also relatively young. I'm 38 years old. I don't have the specific stats to back this up, but I would be willing to put some money on it that I am 15 years younger than the next mediator in Philadelphia, and I am probably 30 years younger than the average mediator in Philadelphia. And that's because, this is something I want to do for my career. And no offense to anyone, including any of the judges that might listen to this podcast, it's a retirement gig for a lot of these people. And this is something that I'm trained for, continuing to get trained for, and I want to do. But so building those relationships because I'm younger is part of it. And, it's always part of building relationships, but no matter how old you are. But with regards to companies, it's something I would love to do, especially with getting into the employment space. And also, doing the B2B work, which I really enjoy, because the B2B work, you actually can create a relationship, right? You can, or continue to create a relationship and build a relationship. That's where you get creative solutions, where everyone's trying to create value, right? So it is definitely something that is on my mind, trying to get essentially being on retainer, right? And right now it's just calling me, emailing me saying, hey, we need you for a mediation in a month or an arbitration in a month or 2 months, 3 months, whatever it is. And that's where most of the interest is right now.
No, that's great. And so, more clarifying questions, right? I'm interested, right? I don't want or desire in any shape, form, or fashion this year to need your services. To say there are clients out there that are listening right now. Do you work in multiple states? Is there a bar requirement for you to mediate in, say, Nevada, which is where we're incorporated out of, or can you mediate out of anywhere?
So generally, to answer your specific question, I'm barred in Pennsylvania and New Jersey, and I have mediated in both states. However, you can mediate anywhere. There are plenty of mediators who, one, will travel anywhere, or do virtual mediations anywhere. There's a bunch of podcasts that I've listened to about, making money mediating, and all the advice that I've heard from there is a lot, concentrate on what you do. And what I do is, I provide service, whether that's virtual or in person. I prefer in person, but nothing would stop me from, if someone reached out who's listening to this podcast and said, hey, we have these, 6 employees who we're having trouble with, and they're going to sue us for discrimination or whatever. We need some help. I have no problem doing that, and I'm certainly capable of doing it. You don't need a bar license to mediate in any state.
Oh, great. And so I've paid I understand that there may not be an answer to this. And I've paid an astronomical amount, and I've paid a nominal amount to have a mediation. How does that vary? Are you a flat fee, or are you depending on the case kind of fee structure?
As of right now, for mediations, I charge by the hour, mostly because you never know how much they're going to give you. That's also still, although I think it's phasing out, or it is phasing out. The billable hour I think is going to phase out at some point, especially with the improvements of AI. I think it's going to be more project based than by the hour, because I think clients are going to start expecting their attorneys to be using AI to make them more productive. But at the same time, attorneys still deserve money for the work that they do. And so there's going to be a balance there at some point, or what I'll call a reckoning with the billable hour. So as of now, I still do the billable hour because that's what people are used to. I have transitioned to flat rate for arbitration because I generally know and it's usually just based on the case, how many parties. There's obviously more parties. There's going to be more evidence, whether there's any experts, and then I just give a rate based on that. I have a kind of a formula for that. With mediations, though, I've started exploring, especially in Philadelphia and a lot of big cities, there's what I call the generic personal injury cases that are, slip and falls, trip and falls, motor vehicle accidents, where there's not as much there's not as much digging. There's not as much unique facts, right? It's not cut and paste, but a lot of it is the same and it overlaps. So there's a lot less prep for those. And so those, I think those specific types, I think where there's only 2 or maybe 3 parties, I'm going to transition soon to a flat rate fee, because that way they know maybe the value is whatever, it's lower, but they know going into it, this is how much it's going to cost.
No, I mean, and I remember the early days of telehelping where it was all custom pricing, right? And because it was call centers we offered, and we had multiple call centers, and that is a rabbit hole of a pricing structure. But we're 3 prices now, right? We went from a formula to determine the origins of the universe to 3 tiers. You have 3 tiers, and so that's great that you're going that direction. And I think that it's such a worthwhile service, and it's great that you're into it early as well. I, like you, I'm a little bit of an anomaly in telehelping. It's very strange for there to be a white guy, gringo, American, operating a Mexico-based company, right? That's fully staffed by Mexicans, and so and then I've not met someone as young as me, so we're kind of in a really weird space. Again, timelines touching, and so. And I think this is a really important thing for many people to understand. Are you able to use those skills when arguing with your wife, right?
That is a bad question, especially because she's probably going to listen to this podcast.
Don't give away any secrets, but blink twice.
I will say it has, concentrating on mediation has helped me be more patient in listening. Especially when there's issues such as the miscarriages that we spoke about earlier, that I can't understand, right? We can't understand what our wives went through with all of that. We can appreciate them and how strong they are and appreciate the difficulties that they're going through, but we don't know. So while she will probably say I can be better, I am working on it. I'm always working on it. And but it does help. I will say that the skills definitely overlap.
No, I found my HR skills from the past of navigating, in conflict resolution things has come into play a couple times with my wife. I HR her every now and then, and so, but I always get very. One of my buddies he is married to a therapist who works with the VA, and she will therapist him sometimes, and he's like, don't you do that. I am not one of your. He's like, I may be broken in a veteran, but I'm not one of your broken veterans.
Yeah. The problem, not the problem with my wife. One of my wife's very good strengths is that she remembers everything and doesn't forget anything. So she also could have been an exceptional lawyer. She's great at arguing. So I just kind of step back sometimes, which is fine.
That's an interesting thing. So when I did a fellowship with Purdue for a while there, which was a fun experience during my non-work time frame after I exited my previous company, I did a series. They had a huge intake program, and one thing I learned about myself through their profiling was that I like arguments, and so like I actually will elevate a discussion to an argument because I'm comfortable in arguments, and oftentimes realize that most people are not comfortable in arguments. It gives me an edge to be in an argument-like state. And so when I learned that about myself, I'm like, all right, well, unless I'm absolutely intending to have an argument, right? I know when I feel myself elevating to an argument, I reel it in because you'd say your wife, for example, I don't want to elevate to an argument because I'm not trying to win with her. Beating her in an argument, I don't want to argue with her at all, right? And there's any argument with your spouse is always a lose-lose. I treat it like war, right? There may be a victor, but there's no winners, right? And you know that. So this is what you do.
Yeah, even if you win, even if you're right, you still lose.
Well, there was a time, and my general counsel will tell you, there was a time that Cody will sue everybody, right? Because there's a certain point in time in your career, maybe where you've had enough success, you realize that you can drown people in legal work, right? And you can sue someone so many times that they will get confused with the first lawsuit by the time you hit them with the fourth and the fifth, right? And it doesn't matter if they're frivolous or not, they still have to work with them. And so, younger Cody. And so I would hit people with the 1-2s all the time. And then I realized that even when I was victorious, I'd sit there and I was like, wow, that was exhausting. That was a bunch of negativity. That was misplaced energy when I could have sat down with a mediator and had a conversation, find a reasonable ground in between us. And, I think that's my message to people from something like this is sometimes we're blinded by the desire to win. Sometimes we're blinded by the desire that, our way, our thought is the correct way. But, in the reality of the world is, we're not one singular piece. It's binary. And there are two sides, if at least, to everything. And that, we will not always agree. However, winning sometimes or finding common ground is in fact the victory. How we go about finding that ground, you can either eliminate them, right, which is exhausting, right? You can win by victory of lawsuit and however, or you can figure out what could you have done with that energy, that time, and that money if it was placed somewhere else. And I think about that every time I go through a process when I want to sue somebody or or an argument or a fight comes up. I ask myself, did I cause it? Right? Was I the cause of it? And can I avoid it escalating? If I caused it and I can avoid it escalating, I de-escalate, right? And so if I didn't cause it and I can avoid it escalating, I avoid it escalating. If I didn't cause it and I can't avoid it escalating, it's the only time I fight. And so there's only one of the three circumstances in that decision tree where I fight anymore. Because if I caused it and I can control it, then I stop it. If I didn't cause it and I can't control it, then I have no choice. And that's the only time that I don't seek to resolve or find common ground with an argument. That's just out of too many fights.
That is an exceptional decision tree, I will say. One of your earlier points was, getting heated, right? That's one of the reasons why I found myself loving mediation. That doesn't happen anymore for me. It's part of my job to remain level-headed, not build relationships with attorneys, build relationships with their clients, get them to trust me. Whereas there was one lawsuit in particular, and I had been that, as you said, younger Cody, younger Ari, was also a bit of a hothead, and still can be. It comes out from time to time. But I would get really angry at opposing counsel for whatever it was. but I was sitting and then I got tired of that. And I decided I'm not playing these games anymore. I'm not writing that. I'll write that nasty email, not put anyone's email in the to slot, and just delete it. I wrote it. I got rid of it. I deleted it. And now it's out of my head. There was one lawsuit that I was a defense counsel in, and it was a stucco case, which I don't know if you all have stucco, out there, but we have a bunch in Pennsylvania, and there was a lot of issues in the late 90s and early 2000s with the stucco that they were using. And my client was some decking guy. So we were small beans in this whole thing. So I'm just sitting and watching and essentially doing a billing exercise. And don't tell my former employer that, but they know. It's okay. But the lead attorneys on this case just despised each other. And that, every single time, the littlest thing, they would get at each other. They would object for no reason during depositions. They would speak so improperly towards each other that if we provided that transcript to the judge, they would have been admonished by the judge on the record. Yeah. And it was so tiresome. This is not how I want to practice. And I made it a point to not practice like that. And it also drove me to be thinking, I want to be a mediator. That is one case that really kind of flipped me. So, past Ari, or, younger Ari would have joined in on the fun. But I'm over that. That's another reason why I love to sit where I am now.
No, I enjoy that so much. And what a refresher this podcast is on my mentality to avoid conflict. I've, for a long time as a gun carrier, right? I've always, had the mentality to avoid as much escalation as possible. And I really try to carry that over to life. And I try to tell it to my wife as well, because, for those listening, sometimes we get so heated and what we want is blood, right? We're so angry and we have to reel it in. So Ari, I thank you so much for being on here, taking your time today to have this conversation, such a conversation worthwhile. And for those out there, definitely, if you're a business owner or, a contract law folks, we have a lot of law folks who watch this, and you need an arbitrator, and a mediator, I think this is the guy. And so, thank you so much for giving me your time today. And I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're very welcome.
Well, sir, I hope you have a great rest of your day. I will let you go. I know I've taken so much of your time already, and I look forward to connecting with you in the future.
Thanks. Nice talking to you, Cody.
Bye, Ari.
This video was brought to you by our official sponsor, Telehelping. Need support for your business? Telehelping connects you with top-tier remote staff to help you streamline operations and fuel growth. Go to telehelping.com and get started today.